Christmas growing up, I must admit to my embarrassment that until I read this question, I hadn't actually given it that much thought recently about how we celebrated Christmas in my younger years. But once I thought about it, the memories came flooding back, and I realised that we had a rich family culture, a rich family history of celebrating Christmas in a festive manner rather than a spiritual or religious manner. So before my mum and dad got married, both the families were already very close. They played tennis together, they socialised together, so it was only natural that the two families spent a lot of time together at Christmas once the marriage cemented the relationship between the two families. When I came along, I was the eldest grandchild on one side, second eldest on the other, where the eldest had been gone for a while and was quite a bit older. So I was spoilt rotten, and I had the centre of everyone's attention for a few years until my brother came along. So Christmas then really started after my brothers entered the scene, because there was more than just me then, and I was old enough to know what was going on. Mass held a little bit of an attraction for part of the family, for my mother and her sisters, for my grandfather on that side. But for the rest of the family, it was more of a distraction in the day rather than something that they needed to do. And in fact, when Vigil Mass the day before Christmas came into vogue, they were very relieved that they could get through Christmas uninterrupted. There were a few things about our family Christmas that were quite iconic. French cricket being one of them. If you're not familiar with French cricket, look it up. With our French name, we had to adopt French cricket as our iconic sport. It was played for hours and hours and hours on Christmas Day. It was usually played after lunch. So a few funny things happened when you play French cricket after lunch. Occasionally a pair of shorts gets ripped down the backside. Occasionally the digestive system complains about all the energy, and the sights and the smells and the sounds attest to that. Another thing that I remembered, this is in no particular order, another thing that I remember special about growing up with Christmas was that my mother's father was Santa Claus at the Warramoo Community Hall, and I was taken down to sit on his knee. First time I didn't know who it was, so I told him what a good boy I'd been and I deserved that cowboy suit. And then later on, next time I realised who it was, and he was a wake up to all my lies about being so good anyway. So that was a really important thing for me to know that my grandfather was that festive part of Christmas, but he was also integral in the spiritual part because he was a very devout Catholic, very strong in the St Vincent de Paul, but he could marry the two very, very nicely together. Christmas pudding. Both of my grandmothers were brilliant cooks. So Christmas pudding had pride of place on the centre of the table. And the great thing about Christmas pudding in the 50s was that they were full of threepences and sixpences. And these are actually some of the threepences and sixpences that were in those Christmas puddings. So it was great fanfare around the table as we all scurried to get our threepences and sixpences out of the Christmas pudding. Sadly, the health gurus put a stop to that some years later for some reason. In my teenage years, I remember very vividly that because I was 10 years older than the next group of cousins to come through, then I remember Christmas being a bit more of a chore for me because I was expected to entertain and piggyback around the yard all of the younger cousins. So that was a really vivid memory, but not so much one of the more pleasant ones. And finally, Christmas for our family extended right into New Year because my grandmother on my father's side was born on the 1st of January 1900, one of the first babies of the new century. So it was a tradition that we all gathered again on New Year's Day and did all the same things with the leftovers from Christmas Day. And I'm pleased to say that currently in our family, we have 2 other family members who have birthdays on 1st of January. So that tradition is continuing. One of my most memorable Christmas experiences goes back to that growing up time, in fact. There are many memorable Christmas experiences, of course. The first Christmas for one of the newer members of the family, the first Christmas that new member of the family realises what it's all about. That's a memorable experience. A Christmas after someone has passed, remembering where they sat last year, what you said to them last year. They are memorable experiences as well. But my most memorable one goes back to my childhood, where my grandmother, who on my mother's side, who wasn't a Christian, she was more like an atheist, and she was proud of that, but she took us by train every year to David Jones in Sydney to see all the beautiful religious stuff in the window. And I thought that was just something in the back of her mind that was telling her that that stuff was important for us to see. As well as the really important ones, I think that was important for me because of the dichotomy between this grandmother who wanted us to see all this good religious stuff in the window, but then had not a bar of it herself. Christmas to me now, I suppose with everybody of my age, we realise that over the years our perceptions change, our attitudes change, the way we go about getting ready for Christmas changes. Everything we do for Christmas is different from our childhood, through our teenage years, to our young adult years when we were having kids ourselves, into our older years. And I think actually this morning I was sitting in the pathology chair having some blood taken out of my arm, and I had an epiphany. And I thought, yes, I know. God sent Jesus into this world to be with us at all those festive times, to enjoy with us all of those festive times, so we could have all of those festive times. So as we realise that more as we get older, then we put the spiritual, the good news a little bit before the festive time, realising that without that, the festive times wouldn't be so festive. That's what Christmas means to me now, celebrating Jesus' birth, to become one of us, to help us along our journey in all those festive times and every other time as well.